Humanity had no history before the Voidborn. At least, that's what the Dominion taught. There were no legends of great explorers, no stories of empires that once stretched across the stars. No past, no future, only servitude. Elias Voss never believed the lies. He moved through the neon-lit underbelly of Omega Prime, his breath steady despite the gunmetal gray enforcer drones prowling above. The air was thick with the scent of ozone and burning steel, a city choking on its own stagnation. Here, in the industrial sectors, humans worked until their bodies failed, building ships and weapons they would never wield, expanding the Dominion's empire with no reward but survival. Elias was done surviving. It was time to fight. He entered a rusted-out factory, slipping past makeshift barricades manned by ragged men and women clutching stolen Voidborn pulse rifles. The rebels inside tensed at his arrival, their eyes hard and weary. These were not soldiers. They were dock workers, technicians, ex-gladiators, anyone who had seen enough of the Dominion's cruelty and decided death was preferable to submission. Dr. Leora Kane stood at the center of the room, surrounded by scattered blueprints and flickering holographic projections. The Dominion had once considered her a prodigy, a scientist with unparalleled insight into energy manipulation. But when she discovered the true nature of the Voidborn's technology, how it drained the very essence of conquered species, she defected. Now she was their best hope. "You're late," she said without looking up. Her voice was sharp, but Elias knew it wasn't anger. It was focus. "Ran into a patrol," Elias replied. "No casualties." He turned to the gathered rebels. "Are we ready?" A grim silence settled over the room. They all knew what tonight meant. If they succeeded, it would be the first real strike against the Voidborn in generations. If they failed, Omega Prime would burn. Leora adjusted a projection, revealing a rotating image of the Dominion energy relay, a spire of shifting black metal suspended above the city. "This relay is the backbone of the Voidborn's subspace network," she explained. "If we take it out, we sever their ability to move reinforcements in and out of this sector. It won't win us the war, but it'll buy us time." Elias crossed his arms. "Time for what?" Leora hesitated, then tapped a control pad. A new image replaced the relay, a crystalline artifact pulsing with an eerie blue light. The room grew colder, as if the very air reacted to its presence. "This is what we're really after," she said. "It's embedded inside the relay's core. The Dominion's records call it the Prime Shard. I don't know what it does yet, but I know one thing. It doesn't belong to them." Elias studied the artifact, his instincts screaming that this was more than just another Voidborn experiment. This was something else, something older. "Then we take it," he said. Leora smirked. "You make it sound easy." A tremor shook the factory. The distant wail of Dominion sirens echoed through the air. Elias grabbed his rifle. The Voidborn knew. The rebellion had begun. The streets of Omega Prime erupted in chaos. Dominion patrols flooded the industrial sector, their sleek insectoid drones cutting through the alleys like hunting beasts. Sirens wailed, red lights flashing across the skyline, turning the towering cityscape into a blood-soaked nightmare. Elias Voss sprinted through the smoke-filled corridors of a crumbling tenement block, his pulse rifle clutched tight. The rebels moved with him, their faces hardened, their breaths ragged. They had no time to think, only to run, to fight, to survive. Behind them, a Dominion war drone, a sleek construct of shifting black metal and luminous red eyes, descended with unnatural grace. Its arms unfurled, revealing gravity hammer appendages, deadly weapons that could crush a man into paste with a single strike. It lunged. Elias barely had time to react. He threw himself sideways as the hammer came down, obliterating the steel walkway where he had stood. Shrapnel tore across his armor, but he rolled with the impact, raising his rifle. The rebels opened fire, energy bolts slamming into the drone's armor, but the Dominion never built their war machines to be vulnerable. The shots only slowed it down. "We can't stay here," Lyra yelled, ducking behind a rusted-out support beam as the drone swiveled toward them. Elias gritted his teeth. They weren't just trying to escape. They had a mission to complete. The energy relay still stood, untouched, high above them, in the heart of the Dominion sector. If they failed here, the rebellion would die before it had a chance to begin. He spotted a stack of abandoned plasma fuel cells near the rubble of a collapsed building. A plan formed in his mind. Reckless, suicidal, but their only option. "Kane, cover me," he shouted. Lyra's rifle flashed as she laid down covering fire, keeping the drone's attention on her. Elias sprinted toward the fuel cells, sliding the last few feet. He ripped the activation switch on a grenade, shoved it between the cylinders, and hurled the makeshift bomb toward the war drone. It landed beneath the machine. Boom! A white-hot explosion tore through the alley, sending a shockwave rippling through the streets. The drone staggered, its armor melting from the heat. Before it could recover, the rebels fired in unison, their shots striking exposed circuits. The machine gave a shriek, an unnatural metallic wail, before collapsing in a heap of smoldering metal. "Move, before more show up," Elias ordered, already breaking into a sprint. The rebels didn't need to be told twice. They navigated through the collapsing district, cutting through side alleys and abandoned industrial zones. Every step brought them closer to the relay tower, an obsidian spire jutting into the skyline, pulsing with unnatural energy. Finally, they reached the outer perimeter. Dominion enforcers, humanoid creatures encased in living metal, stood guard, their forms shifting like liquid. Above them, pulse turrets hummed, scanning for intruders. Elias exhaled slowly. They weren't prepared for this kind of force. But if they hesitated, the Dominion would tighten its grip on humanity forever. Lyra placed a hand on his shoulder. "We do this now, or we never do it." He nodded, raising his rifle. "Hit them hard." The rebels charged. The first shot split the air. A Dominion enforcer crumpled, its liquid metal body convulsing before collapsing into a pile of shifting black sludge. Then the battlefield erupted in fire. Elias Voss moved like a predator, his rifle spitting blue-hot energy as he advanced. The rebels surged behind him, striking with ruthless precision. The Voidborn enforcers fought back with inhuman efficiency, their forms morphing mid-combat, growing extra limbs, shifting weapons into their own bodies. A man screamed as a Dominion soldier extended a jagged spike from its wrist, impaling him in a single fluid motion. Lyra Kane ducked behind a fallen structure, her fingers flying across a handheld console. "I need 30 seconds to disable the outer turrets," she shouted over the chaos. "We don't have 30 seconds. Elias snapped, slamming the butt of his rifle into a Dominion warrior's shifting skull. A high-pitched shriek tore through the battlefield. Above them, one of the spire's defense turrets whirred, charging a blast strong enough to vaporize them all. Lyra cursed, her mind racing. If she couldn't disable it. Boom! The turret exploded before it could fire, torn apart by an unseen force. A sleek black fighter streaked across the sky, banking sharply. Elias grinned. The rebels had air support. Now or never. Lyra yelled. The outer defenses flickered, then went dark. The rebels surged forward, storming the spire's entrance. Explosive charges ripped through the reinforced blast doors, and within moments, they were inside. ### the artifact. The interior of the relay was wrong. Walls of black metal pulsed like a living organism. Strange energy crackled along the ceilings, casting unnatural shadows that twisted and bent. The air was heavy, filled with an alien hum that seemed to vibrate inside their bones. "This isn't just a relay," Lyra muttered. "It's something else." Elias had no patience for riddles. "Where's the artifact?" Lyra studied her scanner. "Deeper in. But the energy signatures are unstable. We need to move fast." The team pressed forward, deeper into the spire. The further they went, the less it felt like a Dominion structure. The walls became smoother, covered in strange runes that glowed faintly. It wasn't Voidborn tech. It was older. And then they found it. The artifact. The prime shard hovered above a pedestal of shifting metal. It was a jagged crystalline structure, pulsing with an eerie blue light. The moment Elias laid eyes on it, something inside him twisted. It was watching him. Leora hesitated, her breath shallow. This is ancient, older than the Dominion, older than anything I've ever seen. Elias didn't care. Can we move it? Before Leora could answer, the walls shuddered. A deep, guttural voice echoed through the chamber, reverberating in their skulls. You are not worthy. The room darkened. The air turned to ice. The Voidborn weren't the first to wield this power. They were only the last. And now something else had awoken. The chamber convulsed. The walls, once solid, shifted like liquid, reforming into jagged alien structures that pulsed with a sickly glow. The air crackled with raw energy, pressing down on Elias Voss like an invisible weight. Then came the whispering. They failed. You will fail too. You are nothing. Elias clenched his teeth. The voice wasn't Dominion. It was older, deeper, something that had been waiting in the dark for far too long. He gripped his rifle tighter and forced himself to move. Leora, get the Dan artifact. Leora Kane's fingers trembled as she activated her scanner. The readings were impossible. The Prime Shard wasn't just a power source. It was a relic of a war that predated the Voidborn. A war where something had fought them, and nearly won. This isn't Voidborn tech, she whispered. This is what they fear. A sudden screech cut through the air. From the shadows of the chamber, figures emerged. They weren't Dominion enforcers. These creatures were different, gaunt, skeletal things wrapped in dark, shifting energy. Their eyes burned with hollow light. Elias didn't hesitate. Kill and take. The rebels opened fire. Blue-hot energy bolts tore into the creatures, but they barely reacted. One lunged forward, its elongated fingers stretching unnaturally as it reached for a rebel. The man screamed as his body withered in an instant, his skin turning to dust before his bones crumbled. Leora yanked the artifact from its pedestal. The room howled. A wave of unseen force slammed into the team, sending them sprawling. The creatures shrieked, their forms twisting violently, as if the artifact's mere presence repelled them. Elias staggered to his feet, his vision blurred. The entire chamber was collapsing. Movie. The rebels ran. The moment they crossed the threshold of the relay's main corridor, alarms blared. The Dominion had arrived. A dozen Voidborn enforcers poured into the structure, their shifting metal bodies gleaming under the emergency lights. One of them, larger, more heavily armored, stepped forward. Its voice was like grinding stone. You have taken what does not belong to you. Elias wiped blood from his mouth and raised his rifle. Then come take it back. The battle ignited in an instant. Blades of pure energy erupted from the enforcers' arms. The rebels fired, their shots punching through liquid metal bodies, but the Dominion warriors moved too fast, too precise. Elias dodged a downward slash, feeling the heat of the blade singe his armor. He countered with a point-blank blast to the enforcer's head, sending it sprawling. Leora clutched the artifact to her chest, its pulsing glow growing more intense. The Dominion warriors faltered, their forms flickering. They feared it. Get us an exit. Elias roared. A rebel engineer, bleeding from a deep wound, slammed a detonator against the wall. Breach in 3. The explosion tore through the spire, ripping open a new path. The rebels sprinted through the wreckage, diving into the dark streets of Omega Prime. Behind them, the Dominion forces regrouped, their unreadable expressions fixed on the artifact in Leora's hands. They weren't just angry. They were afraid. And that meant, for the first time, humanity had something the Voidborn could not control. Smoke and sirens choked the night. Omega Prime burned in the distance, the Dominion's retribution swift and merciless. Elias Voss led the survivors through the maze of ruined alleyways, his breath steady despite the chaos unfolding around them. Every street was crawling with enforcers, their liquid metal bodies shifting like living nightmares, hunting for the rebels who had stolen the artifact. Leora Kane clutched the prime shard to her chest. Its pulsing light cast eerie shadows across her face. "We can't keep running," she panted. "They'll track us anywhere we go." Elias glanced over his shoulder. The rebels were battered, exhausted. Some had lost friends. Some had lost everything. But none of them had given up. Not yet. "We get off-world," he said. "Find a safe zone. Regroup." A voice cut through the group. "Safe zone. There's no safe zone. You saw what they did to Omega Prime." Elias turned. Rourke, one of his best fighters, was glaring at him, his pulse rifle still smoking from their last battle. His eyes were sharp with something beyond anger, something darker. "They came down on us like the wrath of gods." Rourke continued, stepping forward. "They burned our homes. They killed our families. And we're still running." Lyra's expression hardened. "You think we should stay and fight? With what? Half-charged weapons and a handful of exhausted rebels." Rourke's jaw clenched. His hand drifted toward his belt, where his combat knife rested. Elias' gut tightened. Something was wrong. "You're talking like someone with another plan," Elias said carefully. The tension in the air was suffocating. The rebels around them shifted uneasily. Then Rourke's lips curled into something between a smile and a snarl. "The plan is simple," he said. "Give the artifact back." Elias' world slowed. The realization hit like a punch to the ribs. The Dominion hadn't just been tracking them. They had been waiting. Betrayal. Rourke moved first. His hand flashed to his knife, swinging in a brutal arc. Elias barely dodged, twisting to the side as the blade sliced through empty air. Gunfire erupted. The rebels turned on each other in an instant, some loyal, some uncertain, some already compromised. The alley became a war zone. Leora ducked behind a wrecked vehicle, her heart pounding. She had known Rourke for years, fought beside him, trusted him, and now he was selling them out. Elias slammed his fist into Rourke's gut, forcing him back. "How long?" he growled. Rourke wiped blood from his mouth. "Since the beginning." The words stung worse than the fight itself. Elias didn't hesitate. He pulled his sidearm and fired. The shot hit Rourke between the eyes. The traitor crumpled, but the damage was done. Dominion ships roared overhead. The Voidborn were here. Leora grabbed Elias' arm, her voice urgent. "We have to go. Now." Elias took one last look at the body of a man he had once called a brother. Then he turned and ran. Elias Voss tore through the wreckage-strewn streets of Omega Prime, Leora Kane at his side, the stolen artifact pulsing in her hands like a dying star. Behind them, Dominion warships screamed through the sky, their energy cannons turning entire districts into craters of molten slag. The Voidborn weren't just hunting them anymore. They were purging the city. "Extraction point is 3 clicks south," a rebel called over the comms. "We won't make it 3 meters if we don't move now." Leora shot back, glancing over her shoulder. Elias risked a look as well. What he saw made his blood run cold. The Dominion enforcers were no longer humanoid. They were shifting, unraveling, turning into something else. Their once liquid bodies stretched into towering, twisted forms, their limbs elongating, their faces melting away into pure void. The artifact was changing them. Or worse, the artifact had awakened something inside them. They moved faster than before, warping space around them, their very presence distorting the air. The rebels opened fire, but their shots twisted mid-flight, curving harmlessly around the creatures. Leora cursed. "They're adapting." Elias knew what that meant. The Voidborn weren't just powerful. They learned. And they always came back stronger. There was only one way out now. He clicked his comms. All remaining forces, rendezvous at the docks. We're stealing a Dominion cruiser. A voice crackled in response. A what? You heard me. They broke into a sprint, weaving through the crumbling remains of the city. Dominion drones swarmed from above, strafing them with high-energy pulses. Rebels scattered, some taking hits, some disappearing in flashes of white-hot fire. Leora panted as they turned a corner, ducking into a service tunnel leading to the docks. Stealing the Dominion ship, that's your plan. Elias wiped blood from his brow. It's the only plan. The tunnel ended at a massive loading bay. Beyond it, Dominion warships loomed on sleek gravity tethers, docked like predatory beasts awaiting their next hunt. It was suicide, but there was no turning back. Elias lifted his rifle. We go loud. They charge. Blazing gunfire filled the docks as the rebels stormed the landing platforms. Dominion officers, creatures wrapped in living metal, reacted instantly, their forms morphing into bladed horrors. The battle was brutal, fast, and unforgiving. Elias carved through them like a man possessed. The rebels fought like cornered animals, desperation giving them strength. Leora sprinted ahead, her fingers dancing across her wrist console. Targeting main cruiser, disrupting security grid now. The largest Dominion ship flickered as its security barriers dropped. The rebels wasted no time, rushing up the loading ramp. Then the Voidborn arrived. A pulse of wrongness rippled through the air. The shadows deepened. The towering creatures stepped onto the docks, their bodies shifting like liquid void. One of them spoke, not with a voice, but directly into their minds. You stole from us. You think you can escape. You are nothing. Elias bared his teeth. Funny, that's exactly what we said about you. He slammed the override, and the cruiser's engines roared to life. They were getting off this rock, or dying trying. The Dominion cruiser lurched violently as it tore free from its docking clamps, engines roaring against the gravitational pull of Omega Prime. The ship wasn't meant to be piloted by human hands. Its controls shifted like liquid, its systems pulsing with an eerie, almost living intelligence. Elias Voss didn't care. He wrenched the controls, forcing the ship skyward as alarms screamed in protest. Behind them, the Voidborn weren't just pursuing. They were manifesting. Black tendrils of pure nothingness clawed at the edges of reality, twisting the space around the escaping vessel. The Dominion warships in pursuit didn't stand a chance. Some imploded, their structures crushed by forces beyond understanding. Others twisted into grotesque shapes, their pilots consumed from within as their ships became them. Leora Kane gritted her teeth, trying to stabilize the artifact in her hands. It pulsed erratically, reacting to the unnatural forces around them. The Prime Shard wasn't just a weapon or a power source. It was something more. This thing isn't designed to be used, she muttered. It's designed to end things. Elias didn't take his eyes off the viewport. Then let's end them first. A Dominion warship banked hard, its weapons charging. It fired a superheated energy lance straight at their cruiser. Leora twisted the artifact in her hands, her instincts screaming. The ship shifted. Reality bent. The energy lance missed. Not because of evasive maneuvers, but because, for a fraction of a second, Elias' ship simply wasn't there. Leora gasped, her head pounding. Did you see that? It reacted to me. Elias didn't know what had just happened, but he wasn't going to question a miracle. We're almost clear of the gravity well, he growled. If we jump now, we can. The Voidborn appeared in front of them. Not a ship, not a fleet. An entity, a being of shifting void, taller than a planet, its form composed of writhing blackness and infinite, hollow eyes. It filled space, warping the very fabric of the stars around it. It didn't speak. It imposed. The ship's controls froze. Every system shut down. Elias and the rebels were trapped, their vessel caught in an unseen grip. Lyra felt her mind unraveling, her thoughts dissolving into whispers. You are nothing. You were always nothing. The Voidborn reached out, its immense form blotting out the stars. Lyra threw the artifact forward. The prime shard exploded with light, brighter than a dying sun. The Voidborn recoiled, its form convulsing as reality itself rejected it. The thing screamed, not in sound, but in the agonizing collapse of its presence. The artifact's energy surged outward, a ripple effect racing across the Dominion's subspace network. Every Voidborn construct, every warship, every enforcer. They began to unravel. Elias grabbed the controls, feeling them unlock. Punching jump drive. Now, the stars stretched, and the Dominion burned. The cruiser burst from the collapsing Dominion stronghold, streaking into the abyss of deep space. Behind them, Omega Prime and the entire Voidborn fleet writhed in agony as the energy from the Prime Shard consumed them. Elias Voss gripped the controls, watching as the impossible unfolded. The Voidborn, beings who had enslaved humanity for generations, were dying, not in fire, not in war, but in unmaking. Lyra Kane sagged against the console, her breath ragged. The artifact, once pulsing with an eerie blue light, was now nothing but a jagged, lifeless crystal. Its purpose had been fulfilled, and its cost had been everything. "They're unraveling," she whispered. "The entire Dominion. It was all tied together. Their ships, their bodies, their technology. It's all part of the same thing." Elias didn't know what to call it. A hive mind, a god, a nightmare given form. It didn't matter, because now it was ending. The ship's sensors flared as a final pulse rippled through the Dominion's vast network. Across the sector, Voidborn warships fractured, dissolving into nothingness. Entire fleets blinked out of existence as the unseen force that bound them together was severed. And then silence. For the first time in history, the Dominion was gone. ###, the reckoning. The rebels aboard the ship sat in stunned disbelief. It had been a suicide mission, a desperate last stand. And yet, against all odds, they had won. But victory had a price. Omega Prime was a graveyard. Cities reduced to molten slag. Millions lost. The Dominion hadn't gone quietly. They had tried to take everything with them. And yet, for the first time in generations, humanity was free. Lyra turned to Elias, her voice barely above a whisper. "What now?" Elias exhaled, staring at the shattered remnants of their oppressors. The Dominion had been their jailers, their nightmares, their gods. Now they were just dust. "We rebuild," Elias said. "We tell the others. We show them that the Voidborn can be killed." The rebellion wasn't over. Not yet. There were still Dominion strongholds scattered across the galaxy. There were still enslaved colonies that had yet to realize they were free. But now, humanity had something it never had before: hope. As the ship sped into the unknown, Elias allowed himself a rare smile. The Voidborn had ruled the stars for eons. But now, the stars belonged to humanity.